Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
This week on Muskogee Vision, 2019 is an election year at the Muskogee Creek Nation, with the primary election being held on September 21st and the general election on November 2nd. The Creek Nation is made up of 8 districts with a Seat A and Seat B councilperson for each district. This year, Seat A of each district, as well as the new principal chief and second chief, will be elected. As part of Muskogee Media's election coverage, the citizens were asked on social media to submit ideas for questions to be posted to the candidates. After hundreds of submissions, the editorial staff refined the topics down to 5 questions. Every candidate was provided these questions and offered a time to come into the Muskogee Media studio to record their answers. Afterwards, the responses were compiled into videos covering each district and the principal and second chief offices. In the coming weeks before the September 21st primary, Muskogee Vision will be airing these video profiles on the program, in some cases edited to run in the allotted time. After the break, we will feature our first 2 video profiles, Second Chief and McIntosh District Seat A. And once again, thank you for watching Muskogee Vision.
1878 Okmulgee, the Muskogee Creek Nation housed its government in their beloved council house. The federal government forced the nation to vacate the council house in 1907, but in 2010 the Creek people bought it back. Today it stands restored and back to its original glory. Come travel back in time as we tell the story of the Muskogee people before Oklahoma statehood and feel the 19th century all around you. Welcome to Muskogee Vote. Let's begin. Today's category is Ready to Vote. What are Muskogee Creek citizens eligible to do when they reach 18?
Register to vote.
Correct. What step will allow citizens to actively participate in the Muskogee Creek Nation?
Register to vote.
Correct. If you are a Muskogee Creek citizen, age 18 or above, please register online or call for more information. And thank you for watching Muskogee Vote.
The way we present ourselves sends a message.
It can be the loudest voice you have.
Let your song ring out. We are still here.
Remind the world of your ancestors. Make them never forget the resiliency of Native people.
These are threads.
These are threads.
These are threads. These are threads for the tread you make.
The short answer is no. I do not support removing the blood quantum for the public office because that question really means, am I in support of changing the Constitution and removing the blood quantum requirement? And that's not something that that is taken lightly, especially when I took an oath to defend the Constitution. So until we can have conversations about anytime you want to change something, especially our Constitution, we need to have those conversations. And on both sides, we need to have those conversations, and we need to be able to listen to one another and not just have our own opinion on it, but listen to both sides, and really think about the pros and cons of it. But until we really have those conversations, until we can sit down with both sides and talk about it, it really needs to stay as it is. But it ultimately comes down that this is a constitutional issue. It's an issue that should be decided by the people, and until the people know all the information and it is presented in front of them, and so they know the pros and cons, and they can make a informed decision. I think it needs to stay as is.
Not at this time. I believe that at this time we need to have an impact study to let us know how many people actually want to raise or lower the blood quantum, and poll the people to find out a good answer for this. Thank you.
As of right now, we have the BF&J committee on the National Council. And during their meetings, they have certain entities come in, the gaming come in, MNBE come in, OneFire come in, and they will give a report of how everything is doing. This occurs monthly, and sometimes we have to go into executive session, but most of the time, citizens can stay in those executive sessions, and so that's just one way we try to get the information out there. But we can always do a better job, and so I think one way to improve the financial transparency would be to maybe include it in maybe a quarterly newsletter, or maybe have a stakeholders meeting, and this stakeholders meeting not only for the citizens in jurisdiction, but even for the at-large citizens, go out there and have these stakeholder type meetings. And so, that's just one way we can improve the financial transparency. But when you talk about financial transparency, are you talking about just our businesses? To me, it goes beyond that also. We go donate money. We to certain causes. We give money to certain groups. I remember a while back we gave money to a jump rope group, and it was, I can't remember the exact amount, $5,000, $7,000, something like that. And that's a financial investment in there. The return is different. It's not a monetary return, but you do get a return when you invest into our kids and our citizens. So, and they had went to the World Jump Roping Champions down in Orlando, and they did very well down there. I had the sponsor send me some pictures, and she did a little write-up on it. And so I wanted, at that time, I gave that information to the Muskogee media, and to show the citizens, hey, this is how some of the money is being spent, and this, because really when you see the legislation, all it says is, hey, we donated money to this organization, and that's it. You don't see the back end of it. And so I wanted to show the citizens this is the investment we all made into this jump roping group. And I can't remember how many Creek kids were on there. There's quite a few, but it never made it to print. And so to me that's one way we could have shown financial transparency. Like I said, to me it's just not about our businesses, but it's also about what's the outcome of investing into our own people, and so those things we have to work on. But that's just a little bit of how we can improve financial transparency. Is just being open. It's not just our money; it's everybody's money that we're using, and so every citizen has a right to know where that money is being spent, who is spending it, and what the return is. So.
As Second Chief in Second Chief's office, this is something that will be provided by the Chief's office, and I will assist or help him with input and to the citizens of the financials or of the transparency of the investments. Thank you.
Right now, the tribe has a lot of information going out. We have Muskogee Media, which has their TV show. It has a radio show. We have the newspaper. We have all sorts of social media accounts. And so we have a lot of information going out to our citizens. But communication is a two-way street. It's an exchange of information. And so how do we capture that information coming back from our at-large citizens? Again, so a couple years ago, Chief Floyd, did establish an at-large office. And so, so that was a good step in trying to capture that information coming in from our at-large citizens. Obviously, the one way to increase that communication is to increase that office. And as second chief of the Creek Nation, what I would propose is that chief put that office underneath the second chief, because we had talks of, or there had been talks, and we didn't formally talk about anything, but you always hear something about the at-large citizens needs their own representative, but that obviously means a change in the Constitution. So until that can actually come to fruition, and people have to vote on it and everything else, I think that it could be something that's underneath the office of the second chief, and he has oversight of that. And so he'd be, that'd be the responsibility to make sure that all that information is that is getting out there and coming back in is collected. We actually do something with it, and we work on it. But to increase the communication, though, we can have all that information going out electronically, wherever it may be, but nothing beats face-to-face. Nothing beats face-to-face. And so, we've started a good deal with the at-large meetings. I think it's been refined pretty well. We have a good grasp on what we got to do, but we can always improve things. And so, those at-large meetings, I think that if it's put underneath the at-large program, we can make it grow. We can actually incorporate more cultural type activities where it's not just social services. I was in Anaheim this past year, and I noticed that we did have some cultural aspects of it. And we had the blowgun maker out there, and so I was happy to see that. But we're talking with people, with the at-large citizens. They want more culture. Not just the services, but more culture, and so we can bring more language information out there, and those type of things. So, and I think whenever you bring our culture to them, they feel more connected to the tribe, and that's ultimately the goal is to make our at-large citizens feel more connected to the tribe. And so, to me, that would be the goal of our at-large program, is to how can we make our at-large citizens more connected to the tribe, because when you label them at large, you feel like you're labeling them outsiders, but they're not outsiders. They're citizens of our tribe. And so we got to find a way to make them feel connected and more part of the tribe.
Currently, we have Chabon Gouge, who works with the at-large citizens and does a good job with this department, but I believe that we can add to his budget and expand this department to help the at-large citizens. Thank you.
Well, I've always supported a free press, an independent free press. The last 4 years, if you look at my voting record, I've always supported it. And so the question, do I support allowing the citizens to vote on a constitutional amendment? I don't see how there's any way I could stop the citizens from voting. So obviously, I want citizens to vote. Everywhere I go, I tell people that it's important that we vote. And so, but it's also just equally as important to know what you're voting on. And so, yeah, obviously, I would say, yeah, I support citizens voting. I don't know how I could, not allow somebody to vote. That don't make a whole lot of sense to me. But yeah, if the vote comes up, to change the Constitution and put that in the Constitution, then I would definitely support citizens going out and voting on it. I'm not going to tell them how to vote, but I would like to just tell them to make sure they know both sides of the issue and just be a informed voter, because that's one of our rights that we have. And so be an informed voter, know what you're voting about, the pros and cons of it. So yeah, I support allowing citizens to vote on a constitutional amendment for free press. If that's a vote of the people, then by all means, let's go vote.
This question, I believe, I haven't seen an amendment. I just need some clarification on this question to give a good answer. This is something that, for the amendment for free press, that we should poll the people to find out If something that they would like to do, thank you.
This question I feel has a little gray area to it. I guess a short answer would be no. I'm not in favor of that. But you gotta. My immediate question is, as what? Do we allow? Are we talking about allow them as full citizens? Or what? So to me, like I said, this question is to me creates more questions for myself. This question creates more questions. So the short answer would be a no. The Constitution says that to be a citizen of the Creek Nation, it has to be by blood. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that's where I stand on it. To be a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation, it has to be by blood, and I took an oath to uphold that, and so that's what I will do.
This question is very complex, being that we're still in a legal battle. I believe that we must abide by the Constitution of Creek Nation. Thank you.
The current blood quantum requirement for the Muskogee Nation Public Office is pretty low at this point at 1/4. So the question in its current format requires more than a yes or no answer. There's a lot of things to consider here. I think sovereignty in its basic sense is defined by the right to be who you are, and a couple of other rights are your right to your own form of government, and the right to determine who your citizens are. So given that, there's a lot of thoughts and analysis that should go into the study of this question. I do think that it should be given to the will of the people to vote on this. There seems to be some confusion or some perception that blood quantum is tied to culture and language, and it's really not. I know Muskogee are a socio-cultural linguistic group. And given that kind of statement, how does blood quantum tie into at what level or culture are you, or do you speak your language? So, given these two trains of thought, blood quantum and culture, what is the purpose, and why do we need to do this again at this point? I can see that a lot of citizens would like to run for the office of public office, but it used to be tribal leaders thought 7 generations ahead for anything that'll affect their tribe or their group of people. And so, throughout the past historical period, we've kind of moved from people being defined as certain groups, even within a certain kind of linguistic tribe, into what we would probably call a political association now. So the tribe, in more ways than not, exists only as a political association. So is that the pathway that we want to continue on? So there's a lot of thought and analysis and projections and implications and so forth that needs to go into this question. So, but I do support that having the opportunity to be addressed by Creek people themselves. Financial transparency of investments just the fact that you have to ask that question probably brings up that there's a negative perception that exists by people in the communities. That may or may not be at various times, but I think consistent reporting by the tribal administration or even the National Council to citizens would improve transparency. But I think because you have to ask that question, a lot of tribes will implement an independent group of budget and finance type of folks within their own government to serve as a link between tribal budget people and the National Council, or the tribal administration and the council. And that group would be independent and be able to resolve disputes on certain kind of issues regarding investments and what your return on them might be. So that's one way to look at how you might do this. Of course, I think it behooves everyone that anyone involved should know how to read budgets and know how that projections are made in order that the tribe is able to meet its bills and the services of the people and so forth. Communication with at-large citizens, as I understand it, and is we do offer them citizenship services, election board services, and other kinds of services in various places outside the jurisdiction of the Creek Nation. One time a year. I think 2 times a year would be better. I know they really appreciate it. Having been in that situation before, I know that they do really like having, it gives them more of a feeling of being connected with home, even though they don't live in the current jurisdiction. Another way is that I think our technology needs a lot of improvement. We need a central database that citizens can tap into and to get answers a lot quicker than going through this current process right now. Without this central database, one department is dependent on another department to get information that they need when with a central database, one query, you can get all the information you need, and tribal citizens and clients can look at what their current status might be with whatever service that they might be needing from the Creek Nation. This question on free press apparently has become very volatile, maybe in some ways. I know I understand the idea of free press, and I support it, and I understand critical theory and the need for critical construction or critical ways of looking at ideas and viewpoints and so forth. But it's also, there's a lot to consider here. I think a lot of qualifiers need to be looked at. For instance, free press in and of itself, does it mean the agency or the newspaper being completely self-sustaining, financial and otherwise? Or do you continue to take money from the National Council? Well, in reality, anytime someone else pays your bills or your rent or your salary, you're sort of have an obligation to them, and they do have rights for accountability. So this is a question that I think needs to be discussed in its entirety with a lot more thought and analysis that goes into it before it's presented to the people. But certainly citizens should be allowed to vote on an issue such as this. The admittance of freedmen descendants into the Muskogee Creek Nation, also has a historical basis, and if you translate a lot of that into the current times, I guess you could make an argument either way you looked at this. That I think their foothold on wanting admittance into the Creek Nation is based on a treaty, and I don't know, I would have to do some research on whether that treaty is still legal, because I know at one point Congress dissolved Muskogee Nation and other tribal governments, and so what was the purpose of that if a treaty was in existence? So going back to what I had mentioned earlier, tribes have the right to determine who their members are. Right now, it's a blood quantum kind of requirement, which, by the way, is a federal construct used by tribes to admit their members. Some tribes go beyond that. They use culture and language for being admitted into their tribe. So there's a lot of ways to look at this, and I see the argument from both sides. On one point, a group of people believes they deserve to still have the benefits of the Creek Nation. I know in past times, Creeks took freedmen into their wings, you might say, to give them sanctuary, but those were times of very forced oppression. You fast forward to today, what kind of oppression do both peoples face? You might make a point that Indian people still face more oppression than freedmen, whether not necessarily forced, but more institutional oppression. So there's a lot of argument to this on both sides, and I think it's a question that should be answered by the will of the people.